Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins. Great to be with you on this Tuesday. Pretty big, busy Tuesday here. We're in day 3 of the sentencing hearing for Appalachee school shooter Colt Gray. That taking place in the state of Georgia. Gray killed 4 people in September of 2024 when he brought a rifle to the high school and opened fire. He's facing life in prison, but it'll be up to the judge if it will be life with or without the possibility of parole. We're going to dive in. The defense case has just begun. This is now getting into day 3 of sentencing for Colt Gray. We'll watch that in just a minute. In Plymouth, Massachusetts, testimony scheduled to resume tomorrow morning in the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. She's facing murder charges in the strangulation deaths of her 3 kids back in 2023. Her ex-husband, Patrick, was the first witness called by the Commonwealth. He will return to the witness stand when they reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And in Idaho, Brian Koberger says he's withdrawing his guilty plea in the Idaho college student murder case. The former criminology PhD student admitted to brutally killing Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Carnodal, and Ethan Chapin. As part of the plea deal, Koberger avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to 4 consecutive life prisons. He wants a do-over. Most people say good luck. Probably not going to happen. We are in Georgia this hour, and that's where we're going to concentrate our time, because there's this sentencing hearing that's now into a 3rd day. Confessed school shooter Colt Gray is in court again. He's the Appalachee school shooter, and Gray killed 4 people. He admits it. He pled guilty. Now the big question, what to do with him. He's 16 years old. This happened in September of 2024. 2 teachers and 2 students and 9 others were killed, and 9 others were injured when he brought that rifle to the high school and opened fire. Earlier this month, he entered a non-negotiated guilty plea, and now he's facing either life with or without, and it'll be up to the judge. So the judge is going to make that decision. Let's go into the courtroom now live. We've heard all the victim impact statements. The state has presented a lot of evidence. Now it's the defense turn. This is someone from DFACS on the stand. Let's dip in and listen to it live.
Various categories of child maltreatment, and generally they're going to fall into, abuse, neglect, or other. And so what I was looking at is all of that information together and trying to separate them out into whether I had enough, I'd met with the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence standard for those different categories. And I ultimately did end up making several substantiations on both parents involving Colt.
And what, if you can, what were the categories of those substantiations?
So for his father, and again this was focused on Colt in my case, for his father, I believe there were 11 categories that I recently substantiated for child abuse and neglect. And I'm going to make sure I get all this. So inadequate supervision, inadequate food, shelter, medical care, educational neglect, domestic violence, lack of psychological care. Let's see. There's a category for gunshot in our maltreatment codes, and that describes if a parent fails to adequately secure a weapon. And it discharges. There were many poisoning. That's one that I substantiated on the father and mother. But overall, across those, and I would have to look at my notes to remember all of them. But I believe Colin had 11 different categories across abuse, neglect, and other. Imminent risk of harm is the other category. That's where if they fail to comply with prior cases and now the children are in harm's way. Marcy actually, I think, had 12 substantiations, so more than Colin, and the reason for that is that I found enough evidence that she was physically abusing him. There were several sources that got into detail about how he was the target of her ire for various reasons over the years. That's not to say there weren't allegations against their father for also physically abusing Colt, but I couldn't find evidence of like marks and bruises like I did involving mother and Colt.
Now, part of, as I understand it, the case manager's job is to go out and see the child as well as work with the parents. Did you ever go out and visit Colt?
I did.
Okay. How many times? Do you recall?
I don't. At least we have to do monthly visits. Just depending on when it was, I would do monthly, sometimes twice. I think for the month of November, I ended up that my visit was like at the tail end of October and then beginning of December, so I didn't technically see him in November. But we also would talk on the phone, and I would stay in contact with his with the staff there to make sure that he was doing well.
Did his brother and sister have a separate case manager?
Yes.
Okay. And just to reaffirm, you're not specifically a case manager, you were just performing a case manager role because of the complexity of the case?
Yes.
Okay. And during your visits and conversations with Colt, did you ever get a handle on, from him and or from DJJ, what they were doing to address his mental health needs? I
did. They would describe in the records, I could look at how his evaluations and diagnoses changed over time along with the medication. I could see where symptoms would wax and wane. I heard from Colt, too, about what he was experiencing. So I would ask him, generally, do you feel safe here? Is there anything you want to tell me? And let it be sort of led by him. Some concerns that I heard were that he was having a hard time sleeping. There were several self-harm incidents. They would adjust his medication. But the best I can tell from the records, I think that he arrived in September of 2024 and for several months didn't have medication. They were still doing a lot of evaluation, but he was describing what he was experiencing and seeing or hearing, anxiety. At times he would say mania or psychosis, and they would adjust accordingly.
And did the records reflect any improvement in his behaviors while he was being treated?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have an occasion to talk to the personnel at the YDCs?
I did.
And did they also reflect that he had improved while he was on medication?
They did. And one of my earliest notes, I think this was in fact my first visit to see him on, I think it was October 8th of 2025. The staff said that, so I had my meeting with him, I then met for some time with staff, and my takeaway, which I have in my notes, is that they believed that the no contact order that had been effectuated against his mother in July, I believe, of that year, combined with the start of medication, those two things together had changed him into essentially a different child. He was sleeping better. He was eating. I believe it was at that time that he went from losing a lot of weight because he thought he was being poisoned to starting to eat more, and they felt like no contact and medication is what the difference maker was. They believed that his mother was fueling this ongoing obsession with school shooters, and that then seemed to change direction for him. He started participating more in a lot of other positive improvements.
Now, Colt during this time was 14 and 15 years old, right?
Yes.
Okay. With your experience with DFACS, is that a critical time for children in their development?
I'm not an expert in that area. Primarily, I'm an administrator of the agency, but I have been in charge of DFACS now for 5 years, and that, especially for younger boys, is a really important time in their lives. And we are concerned about more and more reports and investigations where teenage kids are exposed to awful things online.
Now, when you had your meetings with Colt, did he talk to you about wanting to have contact with his mother?
Yes.
What was his position on that?
He misses her, and he still misses her.
Is it the department's position that it's in his best interest to maintain the suspended contact?
I don't think that it's in his best interest for her to have contact, but I can tell that he desperately misses his mother.
Okay. During this time also that he was in your care, were steps taken by the department to initiate any kind of psychological evaluations for him?
Typically, we'll try to coordinate at the start of foster care that the child receive a trauma assessment, which they get through Medicaid, all children in foster care are on Medicaid, and a CCFA, which I think is like a comprehensive child and family assessment. I was not able to do those for a couple main reasons. He had gotten an extensive workup to evaluate trauma, is the response I got back from his clinical team. They didn't really want to have off-site contracted providers coming in-house to do that work. And I wanted to respect the process. I didn't have a case to compare it to either, so I wanted to just do my best with what we could.
And so you weren't able to get any independent evaluations?
No, but based on what I had heard from family members and others, there were some things I would have wanted to get checked. He had some very early school records that indicated it was either a 504 or an IEP with some concerning behaviors, and I wondered if he needed to be evaluated for autism spectrum disorder and some other things.
Did you, in your investigation, come across information that indicated that prior to the shooting, Colt had tried to get help from his family?
I did. His mother had been giving him Zoloft. So, when I talked to family members and him and even his siblings, it seemed pretty consistent that there was knowledge about how much difficulty he was experiencing. The inconsistencies were more about who knew what, when, and that's what the status was leading up to September 4th.
And though he was not brought into care before the shooting, had those concerns been raised to you after Colin and the family moved up to Jackson? Would the department have initiated a new investigation?
Say that one more time.
Though he was not brought into care until after the shooting, had those concerns about his call wanting to get some help and the inconsistencies as to who knew what when, would that have been enough to raise concerns to the department to begin an investigation in Jackson County?
I believe it would have been.
And when, while he was at the YDC, were you familiar with what his diagnosis was?
Yes.
Okay. And what can you tell us about that? Obviously, if it goes into confidence areas that you can't divulge, but what can you tell us about that?
So my best recollection is, and this is like several hundred pages worth of documents, so bear with me, but that he came in, he did extensive screenings at intake. There was pretty regular involvement with like clinical review for the symptoms he was raising. There were some self-harm incidents. He was getting therapy, but I think it was the summer of 2025 when he, best I can tell, is when he started taking medication. And then there was consideration for generalized anxiety disorder, PTSD. At some point there was social conduct disorder. I don't believe that's still a diagnosis, or wasn't at the conclusion of my investigation on that limited record set. There was considerations for malingering that I believe got phased out. He was telling staff that he had.
Your Honor, I'm going to politely object. I don't think there's anything untoward going on, but we've already had a forensic psychologist that forensically went through all these things for this purpose and had a detailed report that is presented to the court about all these things. She seems to be trying to go more as a lay person reading these reports, trying to remember them. I believe it could be confusing.
All right, state objecting to the questioning of this defense witness. This is the first defense witness to take the stand before the judge makes his ruling on what to do with Colt Gray. Let's get a break. We'll get you back into that Georgia courtroom right after this.
He Googled James Holmes' gear, saved numerous photos of the shooter, and post-shooting had numerous conversations from custody about the Aurora Theater shooter.
So post-September 4th, did his obsession kind of shift from Cruz being his main obsession to Holmes being the main obsession?
It appeared that way.
That was one of the lead investigators describing how Colt Gray switched obsessions. He was obsessed with Nicholas Cruz, and then he became obsessed with James Holmes and other mass shooters. One of the most disturbing things that was shown in court yesterday was an image of James Holmes and Colt Gray that was found on his devices. The confessed school shooter, Colt Gray, is in court again. He tried to mimic James Holmes' shot there himself. We're learning a lot about this kid who's now 16 years old. He was 14 years old at the time of the Appalachee school shooting. 4 people were killed, 2 students, 2 teachers, 9 others were injured after he brought a weapon to school with him and went to the bathroom, armed it, and started shooting. This is day 3 of his sentencing hearing. And the bottom line here is that the judge in this case has to decide, should this 16-year-old be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole or life with the possibility of parole? That's why they are here, and we're watching. So let's go back into that Georgia courtroom.
Okay. So, again, you can go ahead and complete your understanding of what his diagnosis was relative to your investigation.
It changed over the course of their evaluations. So, he had reported some family history too of diagnoses like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and so there's some notes about that throughout.
Mm-hmm. What happened with Colt's position as foster child? Well, he was in RYDC. What happened after that?
He was essentially in the dependency case in juvenile court. The parties worked out a compromise, if you will, where instead of his either parent being involved in his day-to-day decision-making, that we believed that his grandmother, his maternal grandmother, could do that in lieu of foster care.
Okay. So was she given some kind of custody through the foster care?
The judge permitted her to effectuate a legal document. I can't recall if it's like power of attorney or guardianship, but something akin to that with the mother.
So at some point then, his case was closed with DFACS. Is that right?
His foster care case was closed. The investigative part looking into the allegations of abuse and neglect has continued. It's still technically open.
Since that's still technically open, does the department have a direction that they're going with that? Now that I have made substantiations against his parents, my plan is then to just formally work through the administrative process of closing out the case. If there were new reports that we got, then that could extend it. That's not uncommon either, but that's the status right now. So then, at that point, then officially, DFACS connection with Colt will be ended once you close that portion of the case?
Yes.
Okay. As you reach your conclusion, would it be the department's position that it's in Colt's best interest to remain not having much contact with his family until his legal position is resolved?
Right now, I wouldn't recommend that he has contact with his parents, although if there was some way that there could be appropriate supervision between he and his mother, then I would consider it because of his wishes that he's indicated recently.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Cross, Mr. Smith.
Hey, Mr. President. I'm Brad Smith of the District Attorney's Office. So just for clarification, when you say Colt's in foster care, that's more of a legal designation. He's not gone anywhere. He stayed in the detention center the entire time.
That's right.
Okay.
And he's not currently in foster care.
Right. Okay. And that's a legal definition for like if someone needs to sign medical things and direct his kind of stuff.
Yes, that can be a basis for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were talking about his mental health issues. Were you following the court's or the state's presentation of evidence over the last 2 days?
Yes.
Okay. So you're aware that all of the mental health experts that he dealt with at the facility had found that he was malingering and not truthful about his symptoms?
An earlier clinician did. My understanding was that at some point malingering fell off as a diagnosis. I don't know what the current status is.
Right. So the first, I think it was Dr. Dupree, his first psychiatrist. They did testing and found out, and she suspected that he was malingering. They actually did tests on him that confirmed he was malingering. He was turned over to Dr. Ackerman, which was a psychologist. He followed him, and all this time he's not being medicated for anything. And he found where he was malingering, and then he then said, we're going to take away the malingering because he's not saying he has psychotic symptoms at this point. And then he was turned over to another psychiatrist, Dr. Freeman, I believe.
Judge, is there a question here? It seems like Mr. Smith is on to the moment.
Correct? Or do you not remember?
I don't know that I completely agree with that. Admitting, though, that I'm not a clinician. So, no, I mean, I did see that at some point there was a malingering suspicion. I think it was a diagnosis code in some of the earlier records, but then that it was removed.
Dr. Ackerman removed it.
That's right, and in some of my interactions with Dr. Ackerman and Dr. Freeman, they indicated that would happen, that they were trying to either rule it in or rule it out, and they thought it might, in fact, be ruled out.
All right, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Silva Megardician is joining us, and still with us, FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. All right, what to do with Colt Gray? What do you think this judge should do? 14 years old at the time of the shooting. He's 16 now. Age, obviously, is an important fact to take into account for this judge. Silva, you first.
Oh, thank you, Ted, so much for having me. Look, Ted, here's the issue. I've done juvenile defense now for over 20 years, and I've represented really young children who have done crazy, horrible things. My heart, as a seasoned criminal defense attorney of juveniles, says, give this child a chance to not have life without parole because of the age, because essentially the victims of this crime were also cheated in a lot of ways. This child did not get proper care. They made it very clear that they, the social worker, they don't even want Colt with his family even now. There is a alignment where this child was not given the proper boundaries by his parents in any capacity, nor proper care. Was the child in the dependency system as well? And he just didn't have a chance to get it right. He caused a lot of pain and horrific issues. He does have an IEP, which means he has an individualized educational program, which means that he is a child that processes things very differently than, let's say, a normal child would. So my heart says he does deserve a chance after he serves a very extended sentence. It would be, I think, really horrific to give this, now he's 16, but at the time 14, life without any possibility of parole, not a possibility of rehabilitation. But I'm split, again, because this judge is facing a state and a community that is so broken by this case that, again, the public reaction might force this judge to maybe give him life without the possibility of parole. But the criminal defense attorney inside of me hopes that maybe this young boy can have a chance.
Jennifer, what's your take on this? His age, his horrible crime, and what should be done? Oh, I think you're muted. Nope. All right, Silva, we'll work out Jennifer's audio issue there. Not sure what it is, and neither is she, obviously. You talked about the pressure in terms of the judge as a human being. This area of North Georgia was rocked by this shooting, and every community is. And it's so disturbing, his obsession with other shooters, mass shooters, James Holmes, one of them, that disturbing picture that was now part of this sentencing hearing where he mimics him. He's looking up to these individuals almost like they're rock stars or sports athletes. How does that factor in? And because it's disgusting, and it was done right under the nose of his parents, especially his dad.
It's, first, Ted, I love Jennifer. I hope she gets back on. But here's the issue. It is unbelievably disturbing that this young boy didn't have those guardrails, Ted, right? In other words, if a normal parent like you and I or any of the courties that are listening and watching, if they saw their child doing this, it's not a joke to worship people that literally are known to cause pain. And so where were these boundaries? We don't give a gun to a child who worships people whose whole lives were made to cause other people horrific pain and torture. What could have happened if there was proper parenting? What could have happened if there were guardrails? This child really didn't stand a chance because he was given so much leeway to create havoc, to live in his mind, where his mind is obviously not doing things correctly, not functioning in the way it should be. What could have happened if he did have parents who actually said, you know what, we need actual therapy here, we need proactive ways to align him the right way, to have empathy, sympathy, love, and hope, to be heard and seen. These are the issues that we're contending with in this case. That's the tragedy to me.
Yeah, and you wonder, how Colt Gray's prosecution will factor into it. He was tried and convicted for his involvement here, and if the judge does allow for parole, possibility of parole, and just getting that possibility of parole is possible, but it's not guaranteed. You wonder how if he could use that as a way to come to a conclusion and say it was obvious that this kid did have some issues with, especially the father, which we all watched play out. So let's get a break. We'll get you back into the courtroom in Georgia for more of the sentencing of Colt Gray when we return. Stay with us.
Mr. Gray, you heard the factual basis for each count disannounced by the state. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree that there are facts to support each of the charges against you?
Yes, sir.
Are you pleading guilty to each of the charges because you are in fact guilty?
Yes, sir.
Counsel, is there anything I need to address before accepting the plea? Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Gray, I will accept the plea. I find there's a factual basis for it. You understand the nature of the charges, the consequences of the plea, the rights you give up when pleading guilty, and you are entering this plea freely and voluntarily.
Yes, Your Honor.
That was Colt Gray last week, standing before the court, formally changing his plea from not guilty to guilty in the Appalachee High School shooting, which took place in September of 2024. 4 people were killed by Gray after he brought a rifle to his classroom and opened fire. He's facing life in prison. The judge will have to decide whether it's with or without the possibility of parole. Let's go back into the courtroom as we watch day 3 of the sentencing of Colt Gray. This is the defense case.
Set of time that I was involved.
But the only time that it was in the records that it was ruled out was Dr. Ackerman. And then later on, Dr. Freeman found instances of him malingering to her, or him. Excuse me.
I don't know what was beyond that data set or record set.
After that he was interviewed by his psychologist, Dr. Richards.
Okay.
And given tests when was malingering then too.
I haven't been in, I don't know what's in any of those reports.
So we've had 2 other doctors saying he was malingering after that Dr. Ackerman took off the malingering diagnosis.
I believe you. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that process.
Okay. Well, you told the judge that the malingering had been taken off, and I just want to point out that that's not correct.
I understand. I'm sorry. My time was limited to a specific data set, and I just recall that being something that fell off as a diagnosis.
Okay. So let's go back to DFACS' first involvement with the case. That was started in August of 2021.
That was I believe the first report that we received on the family.
And that was on Colt had researched how to kill your dad on the school computer.
Yes.
And he would have been in 6th grade at the time.
I believe so.
So the first report had nothing to do with Marcy or Colin doing anything to Colt.
Not that I recall offhand.
And then the next report was in February 1st of 2022, so a few months later, and that report was that Colt was not enrolled in school.
I believe the next report was one alleging physical abuse by Ms. Gray.
Okay. So that would have been between the August and the February one?
We had the initial August report that you described. We had a report that alleged physical abuse involving Colt, and then we had I believe it was in back-to-back. We had reports about truancy for all the children, okay. January, February, I'm sorry.
Okay. So between the August of 21 and February 22, around that area is when you had the physical abuse.
Yes, sir.
And that was Marcy, and it was specifically that she slapped Colt, correct?
It was, yes, that she slapped him and that he had a swollen lip.
Okay. And then, so then you had, in February, you had, all the kids weren't enrolled in school, but Colt specifically.
I believe the report it had for all of the children, being that they were excessively truant. It was like over 20 days for each child.
And then the next report came in, that was February. The next report came in that November.
Yes.
And that was Marcy being intoxicated.
It was several allegations. That I think was probably the primary one is substance abuse, but there were also concerns about the children's hygiene at school. The parents arguing, like domestic violence allegations, that type of stuff.
And the domestic violence was between the parents with each other?
Yes.
Okay. And then fast forward a whole year to October of 2023 is the next issue, and that is Marcy test positive for drugs.
That case, I think what you're saying is that case ran from November 2022, right, to basically October, end of October the following year.
Right.
And that's because of a failed drug screen, one of a few, in fact, but
Right.
yeah.
And then, so that was October, y'all gave the kids to the father.
Yes.
And then the case was closed on October 31st, 2023.
Yes.
Okay. So what we have here, the allegations are truancy, hygiene, and mom's using drugs, and there was one incident in 6th grade where mom slapped him.
There was, for the case that involved allegations of physical abuse involving mom and Colt, it was more than one occasion of the allegations of hitting, but that was a very short case compared to the November 2022 to October 2023.
And that was back when he was in 6th grade.
I believe so, yes.
So in 2021 was allegation of mom physical abuse with him.
Yes.
But all you have substantiated is a slapping with the lip.
And in fact, it wasn't substantiated. We had contradictory accounts from the children.
So that was not substantiated.
It wasn't. The children had different versions.
Okay. Now,
All right, let's flip on a commercial break. We'll get you back to Georgia for more of the sentencing. Day 3 of Colt Gray. Stay with us. Welcome back. Last week, Colt Gray, 16 years old now, decided to change his plea from not guilty to guilty in the Appalachee school shooting, which took place in September of 2024. Now a judge has to decide what to do with him. He's 16 years old. Should he spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole or with the possibility of parole? Let's go back into the Georgia courtroom. It's day 3 of this extended sentencing hearing, and we're hearing from the defense.
I'll direct that new things categories have been recently substantiated. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by recently substantiated?
So a DFACS investigation per policy, I think, is supposed to be completed within 45 days. It can run longer. It just depends on the case. Often, if you have history with a family, then you're not often. You have to look at all of that. And then if the current issue that you're investigating has multiple allegations, it can run longer. And in fact, mine did. So my substantiations were across multiple categories. And then I issued official notice, I think it was last Wednesday.
Last Wednesday.
Yes, sir.
And when did you agree when was it agreed that you would be a witness in this case?
I think that we had talked about it leading up to the start of this. I mean, I kind of expected a subpoena, so I've been preparing one way or another. And I knew coming that I could be called, but he asked if I would be here.
Okay. So what I'm asking is, what came first? You knowing you were going to testify, or you substantiating these new claims?
Oh, I substantiated first. I didn't.
Last Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. And you said there were several sources for these new claims. What were the several sources?
Record review, interviews with different people, children, family members, other people that are involved in the children's lives.
Okay. So these several sources are Colt's family members?
Not just that. I mean, it could be the guardian ad litem that is assigned to any of the kids. In fact, it was. And then I'm trying to make sure I cover everybody that I've talked to. DJJ staff. I mean, so it wasn't just family members, but that's generally the universe of what I recall.
The process of substantiation, how long are we talking about where these sources came forward with these new claims?
Oh, I mean, they're not necessarily new. It's just that was trying to make sure that I did a thorough investigation into each of them, and it was just significant review of materials.
Was it before or after Colt decided he was going to plead guilty and y'all knew there was going to be a sentencing hearing?
I didn't know what his goal was going to be for court.
Okay. I want to ask general, broad questions about DFACS and what y'all do, and thank you for what y'all do. How many children approximately does DFACS monitor for homelessness?
If you mean for open investigations that we have for homelessness,
Monitoring the children.
oh, I don't know what you mean by monitor. I mean, we probably get several hundred thousand, maybe a couple thousand. That's almost pure speculation on my part right now about reports that have that allegation is one or many. But generally, we're not going to be investigating homelessness. We try to differentiate between like a poverty issue versus, actual abuse or neglect.
What about malnourishment?
I don't know the number offhand, but I mean, if it's also sort of a sliding scale to try to determine if it rises to the level of abuse or if it's neglect, abuse, or poverty. And so we'll be looking at prior history. We'll look at what collateral sources tell us as part of the initial safety assessment if we get a report that makes that allegation.
And how many investigations do you think in a year are for allegations of severe beatings of children?
The majority of the reports that we get in any given year are going to include an allegation of neglect. It's going to be primarily neglect in basically every county in terms of number of reports. For physical abuse, I can't recall where it falls in the like top 5, but I could probably get that information for you. We have it publicly posted.
We're talking hundreds, thousands?
Probably thousands. We get, I think last year we opened several thousand cases in general. I mean, so they would fall within those.
Same general idea about how many do y'all get referrals for children that had intentionally broken bones by their caregivers?
In what I would describe as more non-accidental trauma cases, then that's going to be a much smaller category. I don't know that we're even talking hundreds per year.
Okay. How about strangulation?
I don't know that number offhand. That's going to be a much smaller category.
Intentional burns?
I don't know that number offhand, but I think based on my anecdotal recall of our cases per year, it's going to be higher than an allegation of strangulation or non-accidental trauma.
How about sexual abuse?
It's going to be a pretty recurrent allegation that we get.
That's a pretty large number, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
How about rape specifically?
We categorize it as more sexual abuse or sexual exploitation. That's the maltreatment codes that we would use, so we don't refer to it as rape unless we've done the investigation and we have enough evidence to indicate that in fact occurred.
Okay. And the last is probably another subset is like child sex trafficking. Y'all get investigations for that?
We do.
How many do you think you get that in a year?
All right, we need a break. We'll get you back to that Georgia courtroom when we return, plus Lindsay Clancy. We'll talk about that as well. Stay with us.